30 days left, my friends. 30. Becky, I want to keep you informed about things. Yeah, okay. Many people think that reading the Ten Commandments will solve most of the problems that we have in our country. And thus they campaign to make sure that every classroom in the United States should have the Ten Commandments prominently hung on the wall. Many state legislatures are working on this. And this past Wednesday, the state of Texas passed this law in effect saying it should happen. Now, we Jews generally oppose that because there is a conviction that this is an attempt to break down the barriers between church and state, which is not good for the Jews. I don't want to talk about that. But I do want to talk about the Ten Commandments. What does Judaism, from a religious point of view, think about the Ten Commandments? And it's relevant because Sunday night begins Shavuot, and that's the holiday, that's the festival where we commemorate the giving of the Ten Commandments at Mount Sinai. I think my comments will surprise you. Clearly, the giving of the Ten Commandments at Sinai was highly significant. That is why we celebrate Shavuot, as I said. According to the Torah narrative, Moses receives the Ten Commandments twice. The first time it happens, then the golden calf happens, he breaks the tablets, he gets them again. There are some statements among the sages that claim that these Ten Commandments are foundational to Judaism. But from the point of view of Jewish religious behavior, they are not. They are de-emphasized. For example, why not read them every day just like we read the Shema twice a day? I'm glad everyone's given me an answer. They're not found in our daily worship. What happened to them? In an incredibly wonderful study of the Ten Commandments by, I think, you studied Rabbi David Kalinkin, correct? Yeah, but Rabbi David Kalinkin, who's a wonderful conservative rabbi, he was a student at the same time I was a student at the seminary, and he became a great Talmudist and head of the Masorti Seminary in Jerusalem. And his greatest achievement was having Rabbi Rudnick as a student. You're talking to the end. I'm about to give you a compliment. Okay. So here's the deal. What this Rabbi Kalinkin, is a brilliant guy, showed. First of all, he shows that there is evidence that at times we read the Shema in the service in ancient time. For example, among the Dead Sea Scrolls, there are 3 scrolls which contain the Ten Commandments, the Shema, and other biblical text. These must have been a kind of prayer manual. The Mishnah, the first code of Judaism after the Torah itself, indicates that the priests of ancient Israel would recite the Ten Commandments when they were parading in the temple. And there is evidence of the reciting of the Ten Commandments in daily worship on ancient papyrus documents. We don't have to get into that. But it changes. And I know this might sound technical, but I'm getting to a really important point. So stay with me. Don't decide to excuse yourself. Lock the doors. But it changes. People who are outside rabbinic practice, what's called the sectarians, mostly Gnostics or very early Christians, preferred to include the Shema and preferred to the inclusion of the Ten Commandments in daily worship. And that was disturbing to the rabbis, and thus they removed them. Why would it be disturbing? Now, this is where it gets really interesting. In general, the rabbis remove the Ten Commandments from daily worship. It stemmed from the fact that these fringe groups, these sectarians, claimed that only the Ten Commandments were given to Moses at Mount Sinai. These sectarians wanted to say that only the Ten Commandments are from God and that everything else in Judaism is made up and not important. This position would basically destroy Judaism, reduce it to a list of principles. The rabbis who wrote the Babylonian Talmud stated it would be proper to read the Ten Commandments every day. And why don't we? Because of the zeal of the heretics, lest they say there alone were given to Moses. These people wanted to dismiss all of Jewish tradition except for the Ten Commandments, and the rabbis didn't want that to be stated, didn't want that to be implied. Or in the Babylonian Talmud, they likewise discontinued the practice because of the sectarians. Even today, there are people who say the Ten Commandments are the essence of Judaism. They say, if I observe them, it's sufficient for my Judaism. I've heard that in the congregation. And I haven't said anything because I like people and I don't want them to hate me. But they're wrong. The problem is Judaism rejects that statement that the Ten Commandments are the beginning, middle, and end. Judaism is not just an ethical system. And the Ten Commandments are not uniquely claimed by the Jews. For example, in the Quran, and I looked this up, Moses receiving the divine tablets is part of their tradition. They acknowledge it. And Christianity affirms the Ten Commandments in the Sermon on the Mount, which is really Jesus' interpretation of the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments are eloquent. Except for the Sabbath, they articulate just general ethical principles that's found in all of Western civilization, not just among the Jews. Now, let me give you more evidence of my point. If you go into a synagogue on the festival of Shavuot, when the Ten Commandments are read, or if you come to synagogue twice a year when the Ten Commandments are read, one in the beginning of the cycle, once in Exodus and once in Deuteronomy. There are those people who stand when the Ten Commandments is read. I remember when I was at Jewish Theological Seminary, that was the custom. That's what you did. You stood for the Ten Commandments when they're read. Why? I guess because the Israelites stood at Mount Sinai. They didn't sit at Mount Sinai. But the great Jewish sage Rambam says, after noting that some congregations stand for the reading, he writes that the custom should be discontinued, for this causes a flaw in our belief and the wrong conviction that there are different levels of the Torah and that some parts are loftier than others, which is a grievous evil. It's therefore right to seal any fissures that might lead to the evil faith. That's pretty strong. If you do this, it's pretty strong, it's pretty wrong. And based on the Rambam, the Maimonides, the former chief rabbi of the Sephardic community, Rabbi Ovadiah Yosef, said that it's improper to stand for the commandments. Okay. Did I make my point? So far, so good? So what am I talking about up here? I think there's a really important point that I want to share with you. And it's very relevant to all of us, especially in the New Reformed Temple, especially in Reformed Judaism. Why are there so few Jews in the world? There are 8 billion people, and there's only 15.7 million. And yes, there's 1/3 of the Jews were murdered in the Holocaust, certainly. But at the time of the Roman Empire, there were 8 million Jews. And some demographers and historians have suggested that there should be today 200 to 250 million Jews in the world. 15.7 million, and there should be 200 to 250 million Jews in the world. Of course, some Jews were killed, but overwhelmingly many Jews left Judaism. Many were forced to accept Christianity, and many converted to Christianity because it offered a different path to God. That was the tradition. That's the tradition. It was based on one principle, an affirmation of the divinity of Jesus. This is not a criticism, this is a fact. That is the path to God that Christianity has offered and has been very compelling to world religion. Now, I want to tell you something that maybe you don't want to hear, but after 14 years, I can tell you the truth. I'm going to tell you the truth. And I want to be quoted everywhere. And Bobby, don't misinterpret, don't misquote me. You're not my spokesman, but you are my messenger. Three words. Judaism is hard. Judaism can't be summarized in 10 principles. After the 10 Commandments are given, the Torah goes on to describe a complex roadmap of Jewish observances. For example, the next parashah, the next section we read after Parsha Yitro, where the 10 Commandments is stated, is this section called Mishpatim. And in one section, 53 mitzvot are taught, 23 positive and 30 negative. Judaism isn't only about a faith tradition, it's a doing tradition. Very little, the 10 Commandments tell us very little about our tradition. What's not included in the 10 Commandments? Tzedakah, repentance, loving kindness, prayer, religious institutions, Jewish holidays. There's no Rosh Hashanah, no Yom Kippur, no Sukkot, no Shavuot in the 10 Commandments. The Jewish legal system, secular and religious, is not in the 10 Commandments. Agricultural laws of ancient Israel are not in the 10 Commandments. Love the stranger is not in the 10 Commandments. Torah study is not in the Commandments. Putting a mezuzah on your door is not in the 10 Commandments. Bar and bat mitzvah isn't in the 10 Commandments. Shabbat candle lighting isn't all the brachot that we say. We're going to go outside and say the kiddush. We're going to say the motzi. Is that in the 10 Commandments? No. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel teaches a Jew is asked to take a leap of action rather than a leap of faith. It reminds us that merely thinking or feeling something isn't enough. We have to go out and do. Now, progressive Jews should not reduce Judaism to 10 Commandments. They're not sufficient to experience the beauty of Judaism. Judaism offers more to us. Now, of course, and I put myself in this category tremendously, of course we recognize that people aren't going to do everything in Judaism. Of course not. Of course, there's so many obligations. It's very difficult to take on all the obligations. There's always some things about which people will say, that's not for me. That's too difficult. I don't accept that. That's fine. That's part of Reform Judaism. And my whole life is struggling between what I need to do and what I'm willing to do. And often my Jewish laziness wins out. I confess. But the struggle is important. Now, I want to get really personal, and I know there are people watching me, but I don't care. Friends, let's understand this by you. All of you are sitting here. I don't judge the action of other Jews. Who made me God? But I believe that those of you who come to synagogue on this Shabbat tonight and on other nights are living a fuller Jewish life than those who don't. I mean, it's a fact. That statement might be troublesome to some, but I believe it's true. Of course I honor people's choices, but we get more out of Judaism attending than we do not attending. Come on. Some people will say the ethical principles of the 10 Commandments are sufficient. I would argue that Judaism says this is not so. On Shavuot, we read the 10 Commandments and recall the giving of them at Sinai. But the Torah doesn't end there. It only begins there. Friends, as we approach Shavuot, when normally we're supposed to eat dairy foods, and trust me, there are 2 big cheesecakes in the refrigerator downstairs that will be consumed after Torah study on Sunday night. Let us go against our natural instincts. We need to make Judaism more challenging, not easier. If I had a choice between a scoop of ice cream, the 10 Commandments, and a chocolate sundae with whipped cream and cherry on top, the richness, sweetness, and complexity of Judaism, I would take a sundae every time, and so would you. More is better than less. A wonderful chocolate sundae is given us through Judaism. Let's dig into it. Every bite gets better. Shabbat shalom.